I'm Corbett Wall with DB Auction, here with your feeder flash for Monday, February the 17th, where it's President's Day, a day set aside to kind of appreciate our presidents and not to be left out as our great President Trump that was taking laps around the Daytona 500 on Sunday. If you saw that, I thought that was pretty cool. But the best thing about President's Day is that the board is closed. And the market was a lot higher, or your futures were a lot higher late last week, so we get to enjoy that a whole nother day on a business day where you might have your government offices and the banks closed and the board's closed, but everybody else is open. They're going to have a lot of feeder cattle auctions on Monday, and they'll still get to enjoy that up market from late last week. Including in your big high volume Monday markets is Joplin Regional Stockyards, expecting around 7,000 head of cattle, and they'll have a good run, and they should have pretty active trade there, as the board was up big on Friday, and we really haven't got a chance to experience a whole lot of that, just on a few late Friday and Saturday sales. But also this Thursday, you might want to remember that sale, that video sale, primetime sale that they were going to have at Downstream Casino. That video sale will now be at the Joplin facility on Thursday, and then they'll have that spring fling later on in March, as a lot of those guys, due to the down market early this week and just a lot of volatile things, they were kind of wanted to wait a little bit, so they weren't going to deliver those cattle until later in the spring anyway, so might as well just kind of cater to them, and that's what they've done. But you look at what happened this past week. It was really cold early in the week, and then turned unseasonably warm late. So we had a big transition there. Middle of the week looked really bleak. We had lost $2 live and $3 dressed on our fat cattle market, and they were selling cattle middle of the week on a down market like that, which always makes you shake your head and kind of get worried of what's coming on. We're in an election year. We saw a socialist candidate in a Democratic primary win a state. That shakes things up a little bit. It kind of makes you wonder what people are thinking here, if they want to turn this great country into a socialist state. But that's always going to play, and that's going to be a little bit up and down as we go through this year. In a big election year like this, it's always more volatile. We've seen muddy lots, and it's muddy, even in the pastures and in the fields in a lot of places in Oklahoma and Kansas and Arkansas places, and saw a lot of moisture as I was down in Central Texas early this past week. A lot of moisture around. Going to have pretty darn good graze out wheat prospects. So we could see some more demand like they need it for the lightweight calves. Guys have been buying lightweight calves for grass since before the first of the year. So that's going to be even more. So we should see our light calves get really active here the next few weeks, with increased demand for those for graze out wheat. Our traditional wheat grazing period kind of just got ruined there. It played out as places got dry and didn't have as good of a wheat as what we were thinking early in the year for the traditional grazing period. But most of your hard red winter wheat areas had enough moisture to make some pretty decent graze out wheat, and that's some cheap gain there, guys. So a lot of them will probably want to turn cattle out there. We've had pretty good feedlot performance despite the mud in places, and we've had some storms go across, but nothing like last year. And it's just so much better than last year. We're hoping that good feedlot performance in some areas that didn't get as much weather or haven't been as wet will kind of break up the big glut of these calves whenever they come out. I've had a lot of big calves go on feed the last 2 or 3 months here, and we'd like to break that up and have a few of them kind of pass others. Just do anything to try to break that up whenever those cattle come out. But we're getting into calving season now, and like I said, it's just been so much better than last year. We're not seeing the big amounts of snowfall that we think are going to cause historic flooding like we had last spring. So that's a good deal, and every day that goes by we're just one day closer to spring, and that's a good thing. We talked on our last visit about transparency. If you guys didn't see that, you may want to go back and look at the last visit that we had on the feeder flash. But with transparency, we talked about how the NCBA working committees were looking at maybe making policy where USDA through mandatory price reporting would try to get more information from these formula sales, because the few guys that are still negotiated cash feel like they're kind of in the dark, and they don't know where the lion's share of these cattle are selling, what they're bringing, what the market is. And you can sure see their point, because they're out there actually setting the price that's the base for most of those formulas, and then they're doing it in the dark, and they're getting taken advantage of, because the packers just don't need that many cattle bought on the spot market, because they're getting all these cattle bought through formulas. And they would like to set policy. Some of your Midwestern members there of NCBA would like to do that. The guys in Texas and Kansas, not so much, because most of their feeding is corporate feeding. They've negotiated these formula deals, and they don't necessarily want to turn it over and have it all looked at, because that's their deal, and they appreciate their confidentiality. And probably even if they did make that policy, and even if they did get USDA to change the rules on mandatory price reporting, confidentiality would filter out so much of that information. We would just end up with less market info than what we have right now. So who knows how that would work, and your packers would probably still turn that stuff in like they have, with big wide ranges on the premiums and discounts, where you really wouldn't be able to tell what's going on. So what really needs to happen is for these cattlemen's associations to set policy where they get the USDA to force these packers to buy a minimum amount of negotiated cash sales. If they're going to be setting up all these formulas and using the cash sales to base those prices from, whether it's a weighted average or what it is, they are using that to some degree, because they aren't having to renegotiate those formula deals very often, so it has to follow the market in some way. Well, they're using those negotiated cash sales, which are thinner and thinner and thinner all the time. They need to, if they're going to base so much of that trade off of that, there ought to be a minimum requirement of negotiated buy to do that. And it's similar to the Chicago Mercantile Exchange. If they're using cash feeder cattle index to settle a board, they want to have a minimum amount of real cash sales in there. And so that's something that they monitor with CFTC monitors that and they make sure that they're getting enough sales in there if they're going to be basing your settlement off of that. And you just think that there ought to be a rule in there somewhere where there has to be a minimum amount. We'd like to see it up towards 50%, but that was like 20 years ago that we had 50% negotiated cash. We're getting down here now where we're in the 20 percentile. But they should at least make it 25 or 30% at a minimum requirement if they're going to be pricing all the rest of the cattle off of there. So who knows if they could get something like that done, but it just seems like moving mountains to try to get things like that done. Let's look at the board at the end of the week last week. February live cattle all through the week. Monday was down $1.02. Tuesday was down $1.22. Wednesday was down 12 cents, and I mean, we were beginning to think that the world was coming to an end. Then on Thursday, up $0.50, and Friday up $1.37, with February live cattle futures ending the week at 120.82. March feeder cattle, Monday started out up 50 cents, and then Tuesday fell out of bed 102. Wednesday back up 37 cents. Thursday up $1.27, and Friday up $2.20. With your March feeder cattle ending the week at 138.52 with some big late week gains, and kind of rejuvenated things a little bit. Even though it was so late in the week, we really haven't seen it, and we're likely to see it on our early week sales here. April live cattle, your next out week ended at 120.32, and April feeder cattle at 141.37. Your fat cattle trade. Negotiated cash sales through Thursday of last week, 54,500 head. And then just a little bit of cleanup trade on Friday, only in the Midwest. Southern Plains didn't see any sales at all. But like I said, for the most part, your live sales were $2 lower at 119. Dress sales $3 lower at 190. Your live sales of steers and heifers through the week ranged from 117 to 120 and a half. But like I said, mostly 119. But late sales were mostly 118. You couldn't get 119 late in the week, and it may have changed by the time the board closed on Friday, but we weren't seeing any more sales like that. But I wouldn't think, if things don't change a whole lot, that we would lose any ground this week. This week we should be able to hold steady after losing a pretty good hunk last week. But dress steers and heifers 188 to 192 through the week, mostly all at 190, and didn't see hardly much at all wavering from the 190. Even late in the week you could still get 190. But Friday, the few cleanup deals that we saw, Iowa had about 500, 119 and 190, and Nebraska about 800 head, and they had some stick out deals there with a little bit of 120 live and some 192 and an end 190 with an end 192. But that's not enough to make us think that the market was any better late in the week, even though the board was better. But box beef cutout values, your weighted average for last week's sales, choice cuts 207.52. That was down $3.33 compared to the weighted average from the previous week. And select sales through the week had an average of 204.61. That was down $1.93 from the weighted average from the previous week. Choice select spread, still very, very small at $2.91, but pretty decent kind of movement there at 593 loads of cuts, grinds, and trimmings. Your slaughter, 620,000 head. That was 11,000 less than the previous week, but 12,000 more than the same week a year ago. Looking at the schedule this week, here on Monday night, I'll be in Oakley, Kansas, and at an event they're calling the Cattlemen's Connection. It's at 6 o'clock at the Buffalo Bill Cultural Center there in Oakley, Kansas. They did want you to let them know if you were coming or not. So if you know somebody around there and you weren't planning to come, maybe you can still get in. But I would say likely they're full because they've got Bill Bullard from RCAF coming to speak also. And so it should be a well-attended event, and looking forward to going up there on Monday. Look at your feeder cattle market, your real-time index through DV auction at the end of the week based on an 800-pound steer, 139.67. That was 25 cents lower for the week, and it did gain some ground late in the week. Had some premium sales up in the Midwest late in the week, and there was no doubt that the Friday and the few Saturday sales that we see were higher, but still, for the week, your feeder cattle trends, which you gain in the auctions, were pretty consistent. Somewhere between 750 and 850 pounds it split. You could say 800 pounds, but some places it was a little more than that, some places a little less. But your bigger feeders were steady to $3 lower, and your lighter feeders and your calves were $2 to $6 higher. And they became progressively more in that direction the higher you went. So if you got up to the heavy 9s and 1,000-pound feeders, they would have been more lower than the $3. And if you got into your really light peewee calves, they would have been more higher than $6. But it split right in there, somewhere between $7.50 and $8.50. But look at some sales in Fort Scott, Kansas there on Saturday. That's a heck of a good Saturday sale to find out what the real market is. And you notice on these lots that I pulled up, these are load lots and bigger. Your 7 weights were bringing over 145, and then your heavier 8s and 9 weight cattle were bringing under 140. So you can see right there that was a perfect clip of what the trends were. Somewhere between 750 and 850 is where it breaks, and whether they're selling pretty good or not. But look at this big long string of 9 weight cattle that actually sold pretty well. 234 head of 908-pound steers in Fort Scott, Kansas bring 138.60 on Saturday. That's a pretty good sale, guys. Look at some other individual quotes. Winter livestock auction, Winter, South Dakota, 87 head of 706 pound steers bring 161.25. Burwell, Nebraska, Burwell livestock market, 119 head of 619 pound steers bring 171.50. And Erickson, Nebraska, 98 head of 548 pound steers in Erickson, 198. Don't forget your big high volume Monday sales. Joplin Regional Stockyard, 7,000 head. They'll be having a video, primetime video on Thursday. And that's your feeder flash for Monday.